Imagine for a moment that a man who was once governor of your state, a politician who walked the streets, of Villahermosa promising security and progress, decides to challenge the Mexican state itself with a fury no one saw coming. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to see the sky fill with helicopters armed to the teeth, descending like birds of prey on a building that represents the law? Adán, Augusto Lopez Hernandez, a Tabasco native, born in Paraiso on September 24th, 1963, with a law degree from the Universidad Juárez Autónoma de Tabasco, a former member of the PRI and now a key figure in Morena. He was about to prove it. His intelligence team, infiltrated in the shadows of Tabasco and beyond, had been gathering intelligence on the main police station in Villahermosa for months. That headquarters of the Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection, located in the heart of the capital. A fortified complex with constant surveillance, armored patrol cars, and a staff of more than 500 dedicated to maintaining order in a state where violence has increased by 30% in recent years. According to official reports, this was not just a police station. It was the symbol of state control in Tabasco, a place where operations against fuel theft, drug dealing, and territorial disputes between groups such as the Jalisco Nueva Generation Cartel and the Gulf Cartel, which have resulted in more than 2,000 homicides in the region since 2018, are coordinated. Attacking there would be a direct blow to the heart of the security apparatus, revenge for the assault that Omar Garcia Harfuch had led weeks earlier in the mountains of Sinaloa, where they destroyed a secret base belonging to his organization, confiscating high-caliber weapons such as AK-47 rifles, grenade launchers, and shipments of cocaine and fentanyl valued at $250 million. A haul that included more than 5 tons of pure drugs ready for export to the United States. But it wouldn't be easy. Surrounded by surveillance cameras connected to a 24-hour monitoring center, with military reinforcements just 15 minutes away and alarm systems that alert the National Guard within seconds, taking it would require more than rage. Surgical precision would be necessary, like the one Adán Augusto had learned in his years in politics, where every move is calculated to maximize impact with detailed maps of the police station, which measures more than 10,000 square meters and has underground bunkers for emergencies and videos from reconnaissance drones that showed patrol routes. He outlined the plan in a secret meeting at a remote hacienda on the outskirts of Paraiso. Their homeland is not just an attack, he said in a firm voice, while his men, former military personnel trained in guerrilla tactics and loyal since his days as governor of Tabasco between 2019 and 2021, listened attentively. It's a warning. No matter how much power Harf has in Mexico City, we will always reach him with weeks of intensive preparation, recruiting the best hitmen from the street sweeper, that group operating in Tabasco with ties to the Jalisco Nueva Generation Cartel, involved in fuel theft that causes losses of billions of pesos a year to Pemex, and equipping for Black Hawk helicopters, those aerial monsters manufactured by Sikorsky, measuring 15.26 m in length, 5.13 m in height, and 2.36 m in width, capable of flying at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour, with a maximum speed of 361 kilometers per hour and a service ceiling of 5,790 m, armed with .50 caliber machine guns and rocket launchers that can destroy a building in minutes. The operation became a chessboard where each piece had to be moved perfectly. Early morning would be the ideal time, taking advantage of the tropical darkness of Tabasco, where the humidity of the Grijalba River shrouds everything in a thick fog, using the helicopters for an air assault combined with ground forces to block exits and an electronic jamming strategy to block the police station's communications, leaving the police vulnerable and unable to call for reinforcements. But they were truly prepared for the repercussions, for the chaos they would unleash in a state already plagued by violence, where in 2024 alone, more than 800 executions linked to the crime were recorded. Drug trafficking. The attack on the Villahermosa main police station occurred in the early hours of the morning of July 30th and 1st, 2025, just yesterday, when the world seemed to be sleeping. Under the stifling heat of Tabasco, Adán, Augusto, and his team executed the plan they had perfected for weeks. The operation against the headquarters of the Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection was underway, and the silence of the cobblestone streets would soon be replaced by the roar of rotors and the echo of explosions that would shake all of Mexico. This was the moment to demonstrate that no one touches what is not theirs without paying a price. No matter how formidable the enemy is, like Harfuch, who with his experience as chief of police in Mexico City has dismantled entire networks. The 4 Black Hawk helicopters cut through the darkness like lethal shadows, silent thanks to modifications to their General Electric 700 engines that reduce noise by 20% and precise GPS navigation systems that allow for low-altitude flights. Evading radar. On board were elite teams, 20 men per helicopter, trained in clandestine bases in the jungles of Tabasco, each armed with AR-15 rifles and fragmentation grenades, knowing their role. Each move was rehearsed over and over again in drills that recreated the exact layout of the police station with its 3 main buildings, the 500 square meters central courtyard, and the 20-m high watchtowers. The descents were swift and calculated, rappelling from a height of 30 m to place the attackers in strategic positions around the complex without alerting the night guards, who patrolled with trained dogs and high-powered flashlights. Meanwhile, on the ground, a convoy of armored trucks closed off all possible escape routes, blocking avenues such as Gregorio Mendez Magana, Villahermosa's main artery, which connects the police station to the city center. The time had come to attack. The first sign was a controlled explosion from one of the Black Hawks, launching a Hellfire missile that destroyed the complex's communication antennas, leaving the station blind with no way to call for reinforcements or warn the military base in Macaspana. 40 kilometers away, they were isolated and vulnerable. The attack, planned with pinpoint precision, was progressing as planned. Inside the police station, chaos began to break out. The police, taken completely by surprise, tried to organize, but the panic was evident, with alarms blaring in vain, while the assault teams descended like a gale, neutralizing the sentry points one by one with suppressive fire from the helicopter-mounted machine guns, which have a firing capacity of up to 600 rounds per minute. Stun grenades dropped from the air, and drones armed with plastic explosives ensured that any attempt at resistance was crushed before it became a serious threat. Adán Augusto had planned every detail. Snipers, positioned in Black Hawks, kept watch from above, eliminating any significant resistance with .50 caliber Barrett precision rifles. Capable of piercing armor at 2 kilometers, ground teams coordinated down to the last second via encrypted radios, secured building by building, clearing hallways and offices with a precision that could only be achieved after weeks of preparation in hidden camps in the swampy areas of Luzumicinta, where the sweeper controls smuggling routes. The engagement wasn't long, but it was brutal. The police, aware that there was no escape with the helicopters circling like vultures, fought with desperate ferocity, defending their positions with Glock pistols and Remington shotguns. But explosions and gunfire filled the air, mingling with the shouts and orders echoing through the nearby palm trees. However, the attackers' tactical superiority and advanced equipment, including night vision goggles and Kevlar bulletproof vests, rendered any attempt at a counterattack futile. One by one, the buildings were secured. The weapons stored in the station's arsenal, which included more than 1,000 weapons confiscated in anti-drug operations, were destroyed by explosive charges. Meanwhile, the officers were killed or forced to surrender. By the end, more than 30 police officers had fallen, and the rest had been reduced to terrified prisoners. The police station, which had once been a symbol of authority in Tabasco, coordinating arrests like the recent one of Hernan Bermudez Requena, the former Secretary of Security linked to the street sweeper, and accused of founding criminal cells like the Brotherhood, was now nothing more than a pile of smoldering rubble with collapsed walls and burnt-out vehicles. When it was all over, Adán Augusto descended from one of the nearby Black Hawks. With firm steps, he walked among the remains of the complex, observing the faces of the survivors, those who now represented the fall of the state symbol. His expression was imperturbable, but his gaze conveyed a clear message. This wasn't just a tactical strike. It was a reminder that no one, not even Harf with his track record of successful operations in the capital, where he has captured more than 500 drug traffickers since 2019, is above the reach of those who control shadows in Tabasco. Before leaving the scene, Adán Augusto ordered his men to leave a visible message on one of the few walls that remained. Foot. They spray-painted. The state will never touch what is not its own. This is just the beginning. The simple but powerful words were not only directed at Harf, but also at all those who still believed they could challenge his network without consequences, a network that includes alliances with the Jalisco Nueva Generation Cartel, responsible for shooting down military helicopters in Jalisco in 2015 using Russian RPG-7 rocket launchers. News of the attack quickly spread. The main police station in Villahermosa, once a key player in the fight against drug trafficking in Tabasco, where more than 10 tons of drugs have been seized in the last 2 years. Now was history. The impact was immediate. State security forces were momentarily paralyzed, and leaders in Mexico City faced a new reality. They were not invulnerable, especially after Harfuch destroyed that base in Sinaloa, a hidden fortress in the mountains with underground bunkers 50 meters deep, filled with laboratories that produce synthetic fentanyl for the U.S. market, valued at $250 million by the DEA. As the Black Hawks flew off into the mountains, taking the prisoners and leaving the destruction behind, Adán Augusto knew this victory was only the beginning. The state would not stand idly by, and retaliation was inevitable. But that night, for the first time in a long time, power had changed hands in Tabasco, and for him, that was enough to continue the state's counterattack. News of the attack on the police station spread quickly, shaking the federal government and all those who had once believed in the invulnerability of institutions. Adán Augusto had achieved a strategic blow that destroyed not only a key operation center, but also the perception of control in Tabasco. But this victory would not go unnoticed. The response of the authorities was as swift as it was brutal, showing that they were not willing to accept humiliation without fighting back. At dawn, the first signs of retaliation began to appear. Banners hung on bridges and main roads in Tabasco and Mexico City. The messages signed with the official seal were a declaration of war. There will be no place you can hide. You humiliated us, but now you will feel what it is like to lose. Prepare yourself. This is just the beginning. The threat was direct, calculated, and designed to sow fear not only in Adán Augusto, but also in his network and in the social fabric of Tabasco, where the population is already suffering from disputes between cartels that have displaced more than 5,000 families in recent years. Not content with the banners, the authorities took their message to the digital world. Videos began circulating on social media showing members of the National Guard training at military bases, some with advanced tactical equipment. In one of the most disturbing videos, a high-ranking officer spoke directly to the camera. His firm, determined voice was filled with a clear and personal threat. Adán Augusto, you are not untouchable. What you did at the police station will not go unchallenged. For every one of our men you killed, 10 of yours will fall. When you least expect it, we will find you. Your time is running out. This quickly viral video was not only a warning, but a reminder of the state's reach. The images included arsenals of high-caliber weapons, UH-60M helicopters similar to Black Hawks, but military versions, equipped with infrared vision systems, and men training in counterterrorism tactics. A show of force designed to intimidate But what came next marked a turning point in this war. Days later, a package was left in front of one of the properties associated with Adán Augusto in Paradise. The contents were chilling. Inside was a cell phone that, when turned on, played a video addressed exclusively to him. In the recording, a man in official uniform, surrounded by federal agents, held a portrait of the politician. His voice was measured but filled with venom, delivering a message that would be impossible to ignore. "We are watching you, Adán Augusto. We know where you live, where you operate. Who are your allies in the street sweeper and your family? There is nowhere you can hide. This is a warning. Stop now, or you will pay in blood, not only you, but everyone around you. Think carefully about your next moves because we are closer than you think." The video ended with the sound of a sharp gunshot as the officer fired at the portrait. His men shouted in unison, "Justice for Mexico." The threat was clear, direct, and personal. Adán Augusto, a man accustomed to dealing with controversies since his days in the PRI, where he was Secretary General in Tabasco, knew at that moment that this time was different. The state was not only attacking his position as an influential figure, they were now crossing the line by invading his personal life, reminding him of his past accusations of corruption by Morena militants and his ties to Hernan Bermudez, who was detained for leading criminal cells. Despite his composure, the impact of these threats was devastating. Adán Augusto reinforced security around himself and his family. The already strict precautionary measures became almost paranoid. Additional bodyguards recruited from former military personnel, unpredictable routes through the flooded roads of Tabasco, and constant monitoring of his movements became his new normal. However, the weight of this war began to be felt. His closest team could see how the stress and constant danger were taking their toll on him. A man who had promoted the Garrote Law in 2019 to suppress protests. Meanwhile, the state intensified its media offensive on social media and through statements distributed in areas of control. They claimed that they had forced Dan Augusto into hiding. "He's hiding because he knows he can't beat us," read one widely circulated message. These statements weren't just propaganda, but an attempt to break the morale of his enemies and strengthen the government's perception of authority. But Adán Augusto wasn't someone who was easily intimidated. Although the public threats and personal attacks were increasingly intense, he knew that giving ground was what his enemies were looking for. Instead of retreating, he redoubled his efforts. He ordered a series of simultaneous operations in several regions targeting minor state facilities. These operations, carried out with almost surgical precision, resulted in key sabotage and the disruption of supply routes for the National Guard. However, the state's response was swift. In the days that followed, coordinated raids were carried out on properties linked to the sweeper, although material damage was significant. Casualties were minimal thanks to the strict preventive measures that Adán Augusto and his team had implemented, but the attacks sent a clear message. The government was not backing down. Amid this escalation, direct threats against Adán Augusto continued unabated. Each new message, each raid, each act of violence seemed designed to break him psychologically, but instead of being crushed, he found a new resolve. "Every threat we receive is confirmation that we are hitting where it hurts," he declared in a brief internal statement. And although he did not publicly mention the state or Harf, his message was clear. There would be no turning back. The war was far from over, but Adán Augusto had shown that even under the most intense threats, his commitment to his cause remained unwavering. Subscribe if you liked the video. The strategic disappearance, the war against the state, was at its most critical point after the devastating attack on the police station and the brutal government reprisals. Adán Augusto faced pressure few could have imagined. The threats had not only become more direct, but were also aimed at his personal circle. For the first time, the danger was not limited to his network or his operations. Now it affected his family, his political allies, and every aspect of his life. Of his life in Tabasco, where he has been accused of corruption and public contracts valued at billions of pesos during his governorship. The days following the assault were a whirlwind of swift decisions and extreme security measures. The banners, viral videos, and the terrifying message that came with a shot directly at his portrait weren't just bravado. Adán Augusto knew that the government had the resources, the intelligence, and the will to carry out every threat. But if they thought these tactics would break him, they were very mistaken. Early in the morning of a particularly gloomy day, just hours after the attack, he made a radical decision. He would disappear from public view completely. This wouldn't be a retreat or a sign of weakness. It was a meticulously calculated strategy to buy time, protect his life, and continue the fight from the shadows. "If they find me, I won't have another chance," he said in a private meeting with his closest circle of collaborators. "This isn't a defeat, it's a tactical retreat. I need time to reorganize and continue attacking where it hurts the most. Like in Sinaloa, where we lost that $250 million shipment that could fund operations for years." With that determination, the planning for his disappearance began. Everything was carefully orchestrated. Adán Augusto stopped using personal phones and any device that could be tracked. He cut off all direct communication with friends and usual contacts. His movements would be limited. His plans were carefully calculated, and his refuges were selected with the utmost caution. The locations he moved to were diverse and strategic. Some are rural houses in remote areas of the Mezcalapa River swamps, far from the hustle and bustle of Villahermosa and the National Guard's radar. Others were seemingly ordinary properties, but equipped with constant surveillance and restricted access. He also used clandestine refuges provided by allies within the sweeper. Each location had a purpose: to ensure his survival and always keep him one step ahead of his enemies, who have intensified operations in Tabasco, capturing figures like Ulises N. Segundo, in command of his group. The logistics behind each move were almost military-like. He traveled in unmarked vehicles. He constantly changed routes along secondary roads flooded by tropical rains and avoided any predictable pattern. Only a small group of trusted bodyguards knew their movements and their locations. Every decision was made with a single objective in mind: to avoid detection in a state where Huachico-related violence has resulted in more than 100,000 stolen barrels a year. Life in the shadows, however, was not easy for Dan Augusto, a man accustomed to leading from the front in the Senate, where he coordinates Morena. He now found himself isolated, confined to small, dark rooms with covered windows and limited contact with the outside world. He spent long hours reviewing intelligence reports on Harfuch's movements, analyzing seizure data, and coordinating operations through trusted intermediaries. Although he continued to play his role in the fight against the state, the isolation and stress began to take their toll. The nights were the most difficult. In the solitude of the shelters, the echo of threats resonated in his mind. "We know where you are. There will be no place you can hide." Every out-of-place shadow, every strange sound made him think that the government had found his hiding place, even though he knew the security measures were extreme. Fear became his constant companion, remembering how in 2021 he was accused of promoting repressive laws. Meanwhile, rumors about his disappearance began to circulate in the media. Some speculated that he had resigned his Senate seat. Others suggested that he had been forced to abandon his influence due to internal pressure within Morena. The state took advantage of the uncertainty to fuel its propaganda. Adán Augusto is hiding because he knows he can't beat us. One of his messages spread on social media read, but in reality, he continued to fight from the shadows, directing key attacks that struck the government at its most vulnerable points. Adán Augusto's disappearance was not a cessation of his activities, but rather a reconfiguration of his strategy. From his isolation, he ordered a series of simultaneous operations in different states across the country. His network captured government informants, sabotaged National Guard convoys, and dismantled clandestine surveillance posts. Each success was proof that, even if his impact was not visible, it was still tangible. However, the personal cost of this strategy was immense. A man known for his composure and his ability to make decisions under pressure began to feel the weight of isolation. The lines between day and night blurred into a suffocating monotony. Although he found glimmers of hope in the reports of successful operations, the constant state of alert took its toll on him emotionally. The lowest point came one night after a particularly violent government raid on a laboratory in Centro, Tabasco. Although the precision of the attack and the ferocity with which it was carried out were unseen, they made it clear that they would not stop until they carried out their threats. That night, he faced a doubt he had rarely allowed to enter his mind. He had made the right decision in leading this revenge. But even in his darkest moments, he found a spark of motivation. Every blow he struck against the state was one step closer to recovering what had been lost in Sinaloa. Every successful operation proved that his sacrifice was worth it. Although loneliness and fear plagued him, Adán Augusto remained steadfast in his mission. His disappearance was not a sign of weakness, but a strategy that confused his enemies and allowed him to continue fighting. The government could threaten, attack, and spread propaganda, but as long as he was alive, the fight would continue. For Adán Augustus, this was just another chapter in a battle he was determined to win. The continued resistance, despite being hidden from Adán Augustus, never stopped fighting. The disappearance of his public presence did not mean inactivity. On the contrary, from the shadows, he led a strategic offensive that continued to weaken the state. Each operation, each blow to the government structure, was proof that his commitment to his cause in Tabasco remained intact. Ordered a series of simultaneous operations in several states across the country, specifically targeting key government intelligence cells. With almost surgical precision, these attacks resulted in the capture of infiltrated agents, mass seizures of surveillance equipment, and the dismantling of clandestine databases. The results were undeniable. The state was losing resources, men, and operational capacity in regions like Veracruz and Chiapas, where alliances with local cartels amplify the chaos. However, each move generated a reaction. The government, instead of retreating, intensified its offensive. In the days following the operations, a wave of coordinated attacks shook several regions of the country. Police stations were reinforced. Military checkpoints were mistakenly ambushed, and official vehicles were under surveillance. Although material damage was significant, casualties were kept to a minimum thanks to the strict preventive measures implemented by Adán Augusto and his team before his disappearance. However, these attacks sent a clear message. The government was unwilling to give in. Meanwhile, threats against Adán Augusto continued. Messages on social media and viral videos repeated the same line. He's hiding because he knows he can't beat us. The propaganda sought to project an image of control and strength, but internally, its structure was shaky. The capture of agents and the loss of essential resources began to sow doubt in its ranks. Adán Augusto's absence did not mean the government was winning. It meant they were facing a more calculating and difficult-to-predict enemy. For him, each new blow was a small victory in the midst of the storm. Although the constant threats and isolation took their emotional toll, each report of a successful operation gave him a glimmer of hope. He knew that his disappearance, although strategic, had left a gap in public perception, but he also understood that it was necessary to maintain his effective fight against an enemy that had proven to be as lethal as it was relentless, like Harfuch, who had survived being attacked with more than 100 shots in 2020. Adán Augusto's resilience wasn't limited to operations. It was a declaration of principles. In a brief statement sent through allies in his network, he made his message clear. Every threat we receive is confirmation that we're doing the right thing. We will not stop until we completely dismantle their operations. The government was trying to demonstrate its strength, but Adán Augusto, from the shadows, showed that true strength lay in perseverance. Although he knew the war was far from over, he was determined to move forward. For him, every sacrifice was worth it if it meant one step closer to total control in Tabasco. A fight without end, and Adán Augusto's disappearance did not go unnoticed as the media speculated about his fate, publishing theories ranging from a forced resignation to voluntary exile. The government seized the opportunity to deploy its propaganda. "He's hiding because he knows he can't beat us," they said in messages spread on social media and in official statements posted in different cities. But in reality, Adán Augusto was far from defeated. From the shadows, he directed the fight with the same strategic precision that had led him to carry out the attack on the police station. Every move he made was calculated to maintain pressure on the state, hitting them where it hurt the most. Following his directives, the forces in his network achieved key hits, captured key government operatives, seized equipment worth millions, and dismantled surveillance networks. Although the state tried to project an image of control, its structure was beginning to show cracks. The psychological impact of Adán Augusto's absence was evident on both sides of the battle. For the government, his disappearance created uncertainty. Its leaders could not predict his next move, and state operations began to slow down at certain critical points. Internally, there were tensions within its ranks as constant casualties and the loss of key resources weakened morale. For the public, however, his absence created a vacuum that was quickly filled with rumors and doubts. Where was the man who had led the most resounding assault on a police station in years? Had he been defeated by threats? Had he fled? These questions were not only exploited by official propaganda, but also became a central topic in everyday conversations in Tabasco. But Adán Augusto knew that his disappearance was more. It was more effective than any public statement. From the shadows, he continued to lead the battle. Despite the threats and the isolation, he found solace in the results of his struggle. Each successful strike was a reaffirmation that the sacrifice was worth it. However, he also understood that this war would not have an easy or quick end. The state would not stop, and each victory was accompanied by new challenges, but he was not willing to back down. For Adán Augusto, this fight was not just a matter of revenge. It was a personal commitment to the future of his network in Tabasco. He knew there would be no truce, that every day would be another battle, but he also knew he was leaving a mark. Every operation, every capture, and every resource interrupted was one step closer to destabilizing the enemy. The government was trying to dominate with terror and propaganda, but Adán Augusto represented something stronger: the resilience and the will to fight no matter the cost. From the shadows, I kept moving forward, knowing this was a fight without end, of course, but with an unwavering purpose. If this story impacted you, don't forget to support us with a like and subscribe. If you liked the video for more content like this, the fight continues, and we'll be here to tell you everything. Until next time, yeah.